Hello and welcome everyone to the next session in our Day 1 and Beyond series. These series take you through various activities related to building out on Oracle Cloud. We are hosted on Cloud Customer Connect, which is our Oracle community forum for end users. You see a poll on your screen. Please take some time to answer this poll. We want to get an understanding of everyone's level of experience with cloud and Oracle Cloud infrastructure. And this helps us in customizing our content for the upcoming sessions. So would really appreciate if you would submit the poll. The session is being recorded and you'll be able to find the recording on Cloud Customer Connect. You can also find the recordings and slide deck PDFs of our previous sessions there. I'm Renu Bhatt, a TPM with the Customer Enablement team. And today I'm joined by Anand Prasad, Cloud Architect, and Joey Hall, Cloud Engineer here at Oracle. Joining us as experts today are Jason Cook, Master Principal Cloud Architect, and Lynn Lewis, Senior Cloud Engineer, again here at Oracle. Like always, a quick reminder to use the Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen for any questions throughout the session. So we're going to cover an interesting topic today. After you've migrated your operations to cloud, what should you do to get the most out of your cloud investment in terms of operational efficiency, security, value for money? Let's hop over to Anand and Joey to learn more about all this. Anand, please take over.
Thank you, Renu. Appreciate the intro. Now, as Renu mentioned, I think most of you are in this situation right now. The journey to cloud has happened, whether 5 years down the road or you've already crossed the first phase of migration to cloud. You're thinking about how can we take it to the next level. And what we are going to talk about, how OCI can provide you some sort of capabilities in your vision for the next phase of the cloud journey. Today, we are going to spend on 3 important topics, what we can take advantage in the cloud. So cost optimization. Everybody knows cloud is not cheap, and you have to manage the cost in the cloud. That's the one topic which our OCI can provide you some tools and capabilities. We are going to talk about that. The second most interesting topic, my colleague is going to come and jump in and dive into that, is the security modernization. Security is the key at every company. It is the heart of what we do, most of the things at Oracle as well. And so I think the last one is people are looking at the automation, the cloud scale. It's a global world right now. You have customers all over the place. You want to make sure the automation is the key for your reliability and the resiliency. So we are going to cover that from an OCI capabilities perspective. Okay. With that, I will jump in from a cost optimization perspective. Before I do that, I want to ask my expert on the call, Jason, who has been with the industries for a long time and he has got a lot of experience with working with other industries as well. Jason, most customers are struggling to keep their cost under control today. And what are the things which you have seen for the customer's point of view, how they can save cost and from a perspective of IT budget and expenditure?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a good question. It's something I'm having a lot more discussions with customers on, is how do I control my costs now that I've got a particular workload out there? There's a traditional way of using all the different monitoring tools to check your CPU and memory and storage across your entire fleet and do what we would have done on premises, just use monitoring tools to make judgments on things that are over provisioned or things that I can shrink down. But what's nice about the cloud is we bring you tools that will automate the work for you and bring analytics and a lot of smarts to just automating that work. And one of the things Joey will show you, I think, later today is, Cloud Advisor is going to be one of those tools in OCI that if you're just getting into the cloud, you should absolutely kind of touch upon that service, take a look around, explore what it can do for you, because it'll automate a lot of the heavy lifting of, do I have compute instances that are too big? Do I have load balancers that I can scale down? And it'll provide you recommendations clear down to a dollar amount and a sizing recommendation for you. And I'll let Joey show you that later in the demo, but that's definitely one tool. From a monitoring standpoint, we support a lot of the open source tools, a lot of the tools that you're probably using today in your enterprise, whether you need to page out with PagerDuty, you need to have automation set up with ServiceNow, whether you need to have, our health statuses of all of our services pop up in a Slack channel. We will support a lot of the tools you probably already have in your enterprise today to notify you, to alert you, to let you know if there's something with the service that's a problem, or even if there's something coming up that you need to plan for, like a planned upgrade of the network that you need to be aware of and maybe do some change control activities around. And a lot of this work, we do the automation and heavy lifting for you, so you don't have to do what used to be a very manual effort to identify all these things.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. And that leads into my session objectives. I think Jason covered most of this. I also talked about this. Let's dive into the from the use cases perspective. Like as I talked about it, you're already in the cloud. You're thinking about what are the things which you can take advantage of the things in the cloud. Different use cases. I think this is a very broad use cases I'm talking about. Like, you can be innovating, like, let's start in the cloud, which is a cloud native right now. The terminology which most customers are jumping in for the innovation is like, they're starting to create and innovate in the cloud. So whether your use cases are in a cloud native or you're trying to bring the discrete data sources, a big data story where you have a data sources across the enterprises, you're bringing it together and you want to take advantage from the OCI capabilities perspective, or a typically standard, like, where, like, most customers are very familiar with a 3-tier architecture, which we are going to double click today on. That is like, hosting web applications for a high transactions. Like, a lot of this applications today, like SaaS applications, are growing so fast and they use the T-tier architecture. Okay. So with that, I'm going to focus more on the T-tier architecture, so that, and an example application we are going to talk about is a pet store application. Think about this as a pet store. I think I have a dog at my home. I think I regularly purchase things from him very regularly. And most of you are probably have known this, like, you can buy the pets, like, supplies, like whether it's a food, toys, and everything. It's much more expensive than the kids' toys, by the way. I have to state this on record, right? So how does the transaction applications work for that, right? What are the capabilities we provide from an OCI platform perspective, and how can you manage the cost of hosting that application? How can you manage that from a security perspective, that application? All those things is what we are going to tie up, right? I'm talking about this application in the cloud and how we can take advantage of cloud capabilities to enhance your requirements, as well as save cost, protect from a security perspective, as well as scale from a cloud scale, from an automation perspective. Okay, that's the gist of this discussion today. Is using a 3-tier application, we're going to talk about what are the OCI capabilities, how you can take advantage of from a 3 different use cases, from, like, management perspective / cost optimization, security perspective, as well as automation perspective. Okay. Now, a simple architecture view. I'm pretty sure, I think most of you recognize this architecture, like, a typical load balancer front-ending the application, which is a classic architecture. So you abstract the backend servers. And so the 2 backend servers, like, whatever the backend number of backend servers you have, you completely abstract, and everything is in a private subnet. We're going to live demo this one. And then, of course, all the data is stored in the autonomous database from an Oracle industry-leading database offering. Okay. Now, on the left-hand side, as you can see, that there's a couple of other capabilities OCI provides, like, object storage is one among them, which is very similar to the storing your, like, any type of blobs, data, images, anything. It can store, like, structured and unstructured data. Lastly, I think you see something called a service gateway, which we are going deeper dive into other sessions. A unique offering from Oracle where we provide the backups from an Oracle, like, regions or data centers or availability domains, to copy into the object storage over the Oracle backbone and not going over the Oracle internet. Okay. So this is the architecture which we are going to double click on today, and then spend a lot of time for you to take advantage of the cloud modernization capabilities at OCI. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, please use the question and answer side of the fence. Please ask the questions. We have experts to answer that from OCI capabilities perspective. Now, cost is the very, very close to every company's like, business, right? Unfortunately or fortunately, right, you can think about both sides of the fences. No one has the unlimited budget, right? Everybody works within the budget. Cost is very critical for, like, every business, and it is being looked upon by many layers in the management, so that they want to keep the cost of IT low. And if you look at it, I've been working in the industry for more than 2 decades, and every time the IT budgets is cut, right? And still you have to innovate and you have to do much better, right? So how do you manage this cost? And what are the capabilities OCI provides you to manage the cost? As I said earlier, cloud is not cheap if you don't manage it better, okay? So I'm going to talk about with the relationship with the application, which I showed about, how can you manage the cost better? Okay. And as Jason talked about it, like, OCI provides you a lot of capabilities. I'm going to, if you look at it, like, 3 or 4 capabilities we are showcasing here. Event service is one among them. I'll talk about it. Cloud Advisor is the one of the very popular tools which we have, so that we can take advantage of Cloud Advisor to see whether you have oversized your resources, which is a very common thing. Like, I'm going to give you a very tangible example here. Like, I'm adding an extension to my house, and then every architect over engineers this. This is a very norm right now because it's a very safe thing to do it. And if I take a synonym on an IT side of the fence, a lot of us over engineer our resources because just on a fact of safety side, right? And we just don't want to analyze that right up or right sizing options, right? Cloud Advisor is one of the tools which tells you whether you have sized it properly. And we showcase that as an example in the demo. What are the things which you can, from an advisor perspective, you can take it and reduce the cost, reduce the sizing, because over a period of time, it learns the algorithm used here and says that you are using a lot more resources than what you need. Okay. On the other side, notifications, I'll spend a lot of time touch upon it, but these are the capabilities, and monitoring is other one which you can help us to proactively know what is happening on the side of the deployment and see that whether you're catering to the SLAs to your customers. Okay. Now let's jump into the event service. Event service in OCI is built on standards. Okay. It is nothing but it detects a schematic message for you to take advantage of it. As you can see, right, it's a resources CRUD, whether you change anything, it gets notified it. And how do you trap the events? It's up to you, right? You can take the event and then pipe it into a function. And then I think you can do the notification, pipe it into a notification and notify the users. It's based on standards, and it's basically any change in a resource, an event is triggered at OCI, and you can manage that event based on your requirements. Now, the other thing is the notification service, right? Like, in a notification service is used in every time in OCI because it is the thing which you want to get notified on a critical thing, whether it's a budget, whether it's a quota change. Like, for example, right, you might have set a budget for the OCI usage, saying that I want to spend like a $500 every week, or $2,000 every month, right? Something like that. And then what you want to do is you want to notify if you're burning that in a week or a month or whatever, then the 50% of the budget gets burned, or you can go by the percentage or the actual value you can get notified on. Okay. And a notification service is integrated with at the platform level. So every of the OCI service, you can take advantage of whenever the state changes, you can get notified and pipe it into the, like, whether it's email, whether you have your company uses Slack message, or even the functions, and you can pipe it into, now the Teams is also getting very popular in the industry, Microsoft Teams, you can do that and all those things. Like, you can take this notification and route it to a pager and all those things. We provide a lot more channels is what I wanted to say. Okay. Now, the the view about notification service flow, I can see from the left-hand side, you can create topics on which you want to notify on, and depending upon the topic, like, whether it's a P1 topic, whether it is like, just to inform FII topic, you can notify based on the channels which I talked about it, like whether it's Slack, PagerDuty, like, or if you want a critical service down and you want to get notified, that's a P1 for most customers, right? You want to get notified on a pager so that you want to alert the people who are monitoring this one. And I'm going to talk about monitoring side of the fence so that you can be very proactive in saving cost. Why I'm talking about notifications, monitoring, and the events, all those capabilities at OCI is, how can you save cost from a production down, from a service being down? That's a huge cost for the transaction websites. For example, if you're a customer of Macy's or a very high transactions, like, I talked about pet store applications, the revenue is all about website being up 99.99 times. Like, if the website goes down, there is a revenue impact on that. So how can you proactively figure out what's happening? Maybe the CPU usage on that particular, the backend server is more than 80%. How can I proactively take care of it? Add more additional servers, auto scaling, right? All those things provides you from a monitoring aspect, which I'm going to dive into the next slide. Before I dive into monitoring, I want to talk about one of the key pieces which we are going to focus in this presentation, which is Cloud Advisor. I touched upon a lot of this Cloud Advisor in my discussion earlier. Cloud Advisor is one of the things, is a built-in for Oracle Cloud, basically recommendations from what is the usage of the existing resources you're doing. It does the daily scans of your tenancy and sees that whether the resources are being appropriately sized. Is there any sort of abnormally found? Basically it reaches out to the another tool called Cloud Guard and figures out if there are any security vulnerabilities. For example, we're going to showcase this as a bucket, object storage bucket example. Many times users don't even realize that when they create an object storage bucket, they just create a bucket and make it public because they want to access it from their home, or they want to access it from outside their corporate VPN. They just make it public so that they can access it from anywhere. You can see that in CloudGuard, the bucket is definitely public and it is security vulnerable, so that somebody can make sure attack it, that or come and download the content, or it is vulnerable to the data loss prevention. It's mainly that is the risk which it highlights you in the daily scans. Okay. Now, before I touch upon monitoring, I want to bring in Jason. I've been talking about this cost optimization thing, and I want to get some industry expert advice on monitoring. I know monitoring is a very, very bigger topic. You have a monitoring tools from a lot of customers have monitoring tools at the system level, SolarWinds and other tools. They have a monitoring at application level, Datadog, etc. They have a monitoring for networking. It's very fragmented monitoring tools in the today's industry. Okay. I want to ask our industry expert, Jason, in today's world, Jason, what is Oracle's strategy for monitoring, and what are the things which they can cover, or maybe what does the Oracle support from them managing their tools of this fragmented tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to say it's a little bit of both. We don't have a one solution that's going to wipe out all your different monitoring tools. But when it comes to some of the common ones across all the cloud platforms, you're monitoring for CPU, you're monitoring for up, down, you're monitoring your logs and specific events that happen. We've got a lot of services built into the platform, whether you're looking at flow logs for your networking, you're looking at fleet management for your databases and how they're performing across multiple databases, or you just need to dig into an individual server to do performance troubleshooting, right? All those basic monitors are going to come with, OCI free of charge, right? These are ones that we built in the platform that you can dig right into. There's going to be a lot of times that you're going to need a little bit more power, especially when you're trying to diagnose something that is an application-related tool. And in those circumstances, we will plug into those tools, right? If you're in a microservices type environment and you need to be able to diagnose your environment, and you're good with New Relic, you got Prometheus, you've got Grafana, we're going to be able to boil up the interesting information from those microservices to those tools so that you can continue using your existing tool sets, your existing skills, and be able to troubleshoot from the apps you have today. So, and this is what I see, across most of the customers. They use what they can out of the console for free, especially what's common. They've got tools they've already got expertise in, and they want to continue extending the value of them. And we'll support those, through our ecosystem, being able to boil up additional metrics, additional alerts and alarms and details to those tools.
Perfect. And that leads to one message which I want to add, when Jason is talking about is what Oracle does is it supports standard-based monitoring. That's what I think, Jason, if I can summarize that, we do provide the monitoring capability at OCI. As you can see, we do provide application monitoring, and also as a log aggregation service where you can collect the logging and then dashboard the logging as a single pane of window. If you have the tools like what Jason talked about it, you can certainly use those tools because we do support all the standards-based tools, and you can save your investments already done, and you can bring those into a single pane of window from an OCI perspective. Okay.
So Anand, we have Len here, and Len, would you like to add something to that on monitoring?
The key element with respect to monitoring that we have is that it's built on open standards, as noted in the slide, but also with respect to applications performance monitoring, you can set up any one of 250 different parsers once you set up the agent so that you can get exactly what you want with that monitoring. In addition to that, you have the ability to do synthetic monitoring. By that, reference, we can set up a group of attackers, if you will, or users of your application, and then you can set scripts in there to perform particular actions at a time and a rate that you want to test that application's performance, so that you can choose the right size container, the right size virtual machine for your application during that process.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. Thank you, Lynn, for that expert comment. And if I want to jump in, dive into the application monitoring, you can see what Lynn was talking about, like, the end users and server monitoring, the OCI provides you, as well as the logging perspective. I think we do collect a lot of logging perspective, audit log, service log, and custom log, so that you can have a, proper decisions to be made based on, the logging information. Now, before I dive into the next session, which is I talked about cost optimization in the session 1, right? The first part of it is cost optimization. And the second part is what I want to focus on is the security modernization, okay? Security is, again, it's a key to everybody's heart, and most companies rely on security. And at OCI, we do take security as very, very seriously. We build security from the ground up. It's not an afterthought for an OCI. Oracle has been very focused on security for many, many decades. Our database is one of the perfect examples. We have security built in, a lot more features. But I want to talk about one of the most common things which is going around in the industry right now, okay? And that industry, the particular topic is zero trust, okay? You can see these buzzwords being used everywhere. What is zero trust, okay? Now, I want to bring in Jason again to talk about zero trust while my colleague Joey gets prepared to talk about security modernization. Jason, zero trust has become a norm in today's world, as you know, right? Can you please comment upon OCI support for zero trust model?
Yeah, the zero trust model has several tenets. The one I get a chance to talk with customers actually quite frequently about is around the idea that access to any resources is determined by an IAM policy, and there's multiple conditions that you've got to evaluate before access is granted, right? At scale, this is a really difficult challenge to manage, because we've got a wide array of services, and there's this industry shift where we're trying to make sure that the business is more autonomous, that they have more safe self-service capabilities. So as we scale out across multiple services, as we enable all these teams to be able to do more without having to go through core IT, being able to rein in access and being able to validate it before it's granted is a pretty challenging thing to do. Foundationally, what most customers do when they start to build out an OCI is they use a couple services to provide them an easy way to make those policies for access easy to write. Compartments in OCI is definitely something you should check out. So compartments is basically the idea of taking a logical container and wrapping around your resources, whether it's storage or servers or databases. Resource tags, all cloud providers have this. This is absolutely something you should be doing. Every resource should have tags, right? Who created it, right? This is Bob's server. Bob created it on, April 23rd of 2003, and it's prod or dev. I mean, that is absolutely something you should do. And then, of course, the resource type. So, for example, when you're trying to, get that core tendency of, I want to make sure that there's multiple conditions being validated, you could write a policy that says something like this. The finance DBAs are granted full admin access to a test database in the finance compartment, right? So you use the resource type, the compartment name, the type of access, and the group to be able to, specify a very specific policy that evaluates multiple conditions to basically check off that tenet of the zero trust model of, validating your access. But compartments are something you should be looking at. Tags are something you should be doing 100% of the time. And then using resource type as you're writing your IAM policy. That's something that'll make that a lot easier for you when you're going to write those policies.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. And building off of the theme there, so as the theme of today's presentation is you're in the cloud, now what? And one of the big now what's is how do we handle security when we're working in the cloud environment or with an OCI in general? And there are a couple of services that you're going to want to be aware of to help increase your security posture at different sections of your environment. And you can see a couple of them on the screen here. So if you look here at the left, you have your web application firewall, and that'll be there. It's a managed firewall service, and it will be mainly there to protect your applications from any malicious and unwanted internet traffic. And you'll have several different areas that you can configure when you set this up. So within your web application firewall policy to maybe protect against things like SQL injections, cross-site scripting, DDoS attacks, and all of those. And then if you look next to that, we have CloudGuard. And when you are working within your cloud environment, you want to gain visibility into what's happening within your tenancy. And what CloudGuard is going to do is monitor your entire tenancy for both resources, resource configurations, and activity on those resources to give you an idea of what's a potential threat, what's a potential risk that you have in your environment, and not only giving you the visibility, but also providing you with some different recommendations on how you could go about resolving that. So that's going to be kind of your reactive approach to potential risks within your tenancy. Then you also want to have preventative measures as well. So security zones are going to be one of the ways in which you can prevent actions or prevent certain configurations of your resources from being there in the first place. So if I want to not allow the creation of public buckets within one of my compartments, so you just mentioned compartments there, you could prevent that sort of action from happening within the first place and really lock down your more critical environments. And then lastly, on the right, you have your bastion service. So making it easier to securely access your hosts within your private networks. It's going to give you jump host as a service. So it can provision and deprovision jump host servers for you, and then give access only for the time that it's needed by people who have the appropriate access. So each of these is going to tackle a different use case for each area of your environment. And double clicking into the web application firewall here. So talking about enforcing the edge of your application. So your web application firewall is going to be attached to an enforcement point. So you could see like a load balancer here, or maybe something like a web application domain name. And you're going to configure this to, again, prevent whatever type of attack on your application that you see fit with your web application firewall policy. And you can see here, this ties into CloudGuard here at the bottom left. A couple of the services that we're going to talk about here today are going to tie into CloudGuard because, again, that is your overarching security monitoring tool. And then it could warn you at a high level of a potential issue. You could go in and take action from the web application firewall and then maybe adjust your policy or choose the type of response you want for that there. And this will just give you a look at some of the layers for the web application firewall, giving you a better idea of what can I actually configure within one of these web application firewall policies. So maybe I want to restrict access for my application based off of the geography of the request, or maybe the header information. Maybe I want to set up different ways to identify suspicious activity that could be from a bot. So there's bot management algorithms that you'll be able to include. Also not mentioned here would be rate limiting. So rate limiting is something that you configure at multiple thresholds. So maybe at one threshold, I want to do a check response. And then at a higher rate, I want to do a total deny response. There's a lot of other responses that you can take into effect there, but you have the ability to set whatever these thresholds are for your particular application. And one other area that you want to gain visibility into within your cloud environment is going to be potential risks to your compute host or your container images. And the way that you can do that is through utilizing the OCI vulnerability scanning service. And this service will routinely check your compute hosts or container images based off of whatever type of scan you have chosen to do for that group of resources. So if I want to, let's say, identify potential vulnerabilities for maybe ports that are unintentionally left open, because that might be a potential area of attack for your cloud resources. Or maybe there are some operating system packages that require updates or patches or different configurations that people might exploit as well. You'll have different types of scans that you can utilize to identify those potential vulnerabilities, and then you'll get a detailed report with some recommendations to let you know how you could go about alleviating some of those issues. And again, following along that theme, you can see this also ties into CloudGuard here on the screen, so the bottom left corner there. And CloudGuard could say, warn you of a potential vulnerability at a high level. You would go into the scanning service. You could view more details of the report and take action from there. So all of this, again, tying into that integrated theme of Oracle Cloud Security, allowing you to kind of gain the visibility and take the detailed action needed. And you've heard this mentioned a couple times, and I will be getting into the console to discuss this as well. But we talked a bit about Oracle CloudGuard. So the main goal, monitoring your resources and activity on those resources to help detect potential problems, and then giving you ways in which you can fix those problems. And those could either be automated responses or notifications for you to go in and determine how you would like to manually resolve that as well, because some might be a little more nuanced. And lastly, if you start to see these problems within your tenancy and you start to remediate some of these issues as well, you'll get an overall security score and risk score to let you know how you're doing over time. And these are just a couple terms to get you familiar with how CloudGuard works. When really what this is saying is on the left, targets, what are you monitoring? And those will be the compartments you designate within your tenancy. And then detectors is how you are choosing to monitor those targets. So you get a set of rules that you'll be able to enable or disable or customize how you see fit. Then problems will potentially arise based off of how you've chosen to monitor those targets. And then each problem will have some kind of response. So either automated or a manual recommendation that you can utilize. So those are going to be the general key terms to be aware of as you're working within CloudGuard. And to give you a quick example, make this a little more tangible for you, is the workflow here you see on the screen. So let's say here at the bottom left, I have a user who made an object storage bucket public. So I would say within CloudGuard, I have a compartment that's designated as a target, and this public bucket was in that target compartment. The user goes, makes that visibility public. You can see that I have a rule that states, well, if that happens, create a problem with this severity level. The problem is generated, and then you have your two different ways to respond. So the top would be your more automated route. So you could send out a notification to somebody based off of this event, and then they could come in and respond as they see fit. Or you could utilize something like OCI functions. That's our serverless application development platform. You could code an action to be taken, like making the bucket private, or triggering some other process that you would like to do based off of this event. So there's a lot of capabilities around OCI functions that you could do here. So great for automation. Versus the other route, you could see the more manual one, someone who's designated as like a CloudGuard operator. They could look at the recommendation and choose how they would like to respond. In this case, just making the bucket private. And before we get into automation, quickly, Jason, what tools have you seen gain the most traction within the industry, or what tools are customers most excited about to use or find the most beneficial?
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of stolen the thunder here with CloudGuard. That's the first one, right? And it's gonna tackle the problem that is an ongoing challenge with anybody deploying resources in the cloud, right? That's the configuration drift, where I've deployed the service a certain way and over time, right, because of reasons of troubleshooting, or people have a little bit of manual access they shouldn't, the original configuration starts drifting and starts coming out of compliance or starts weakening your overall security posture. The other one I throw out there, and we don't have a lot of time to jump in it today, that's gotten some of my customers exciting, is our new OCI network firewall. And what that is a cloud native service that we manage that is a firewall powered by Palo Alto's own networking technology. So this is a Palo Alto firewall. It's a managed service, meaning we take care of the infrastructure, but you get the same power that you have with all of the recipes and technology that comes with their firewall service, but you don't have the overhead of managing it, right? And that's probably a topic for another deep dive session. It was something we announced in Cloud World last year, and it's become kind of a hot topic for how do I protect my perimeter without having to manage a whole fleet of firewalls myself. But CloudGuard, OCI network firewall, those have been kind of hot topics lately with my customers.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Joey. And now coming back to the last topic, okay? So I think, again, I want to restate the three topics which we talked about. The cost optimization is the first topic. The second topic we talked about is security modernization, which I think Joey and Jason covered. And the last one is the automation. I think automation is very close to my heart because I come from a developer background. And I think in the cloud world, the scale which is very, very, very terrifying sometimes, is like, how can you scale at cloud level, right? You have customers globally in today's world, like, whether it is North America based customers, Latin America, APAC, and Europe, right? How can you want your customers to have a best experience, low latency? So you need to have a reliability deployments across the region so that you can have the same service availability to closer to where your customers are, whether it's language dependent customers or language specific customers or just a global deployment, okay? So from an automation perspective, what I'm going to touch upon is like, I'm going to talk about what are the capabilities OCI provides it and how you can take up advantage for automation at cloud scale. Okay. Now, one of the things like, OCI provides is like, infrastructure as a code, like, tools for infrastructure as a code. So you can make sure you define the end state and let the tool do everything for you. And then it's like sort of like a self-documenting infrastructure. It's all like, writing the code and creating the infrastructure as a code. Okay. Now, as you can see on the slide, right, what OCI provides you is the capability to build on standards. Like, most of the customers in today's world are leading to the Terraform as a Terraform for the infrastructure as a code, so that they can script everything in Terraform and deploy it for creating their core services on an infrastructure. And OCI has not reinvented anything, but made sure we built the bells and whistles to take Terraform as a service. And that's what we call it as resource manager. So resource manager from OCI perspective is nothing but a tool which is wrapped around a Terraform as a service and to create a core services like compute, storage, and networks. And it follows the same lingo as a resource manager does, as a Terraform does, like, plan, init, plan, apply, destroy. So if you're familiar with the Terraform, like, resource manager does not require any sort of like, learning experience. It is very easy to bring it in and deploy it using resource manager. At the same time, you can also take advantage of the resource manager bells and whistles and takes out a lot of nuances if you want to run a Terraform as a standalone. When I used to run Terraform as a standalone, like managing the state file was a nuance, like, make sure like, the multiple people running the same Terraform, like, going into the critical section and corrupting the deployment was another nuance. Like resource manager takes care of on the drift detection, right? Like, once we deploy it, people go and start making changes to it. And that's another nuance. Like resource manager provides you all those capabilities for you, and behind the screens, everything is run in a Terraform. Okay, so for an automation for at a cloud scale, what OCI is recommending is like, use the resource manager from a customer perspective, take advantage of all the investments you're done in automation using Terraform, bring the Terraforms in, whether the Terraforms exist in a GitLab, GitHubs, in any source control systems, or you can also reverse engineering if you have manually created a resources in a compartment and then create a resource manager templates, which we call it as stacks. Okay, I'm pretty sure Jovi is going to touch upon a little bit on resource manager in the interest of time. I don't want to take much of the time I want to dive into the demo so that you can see what we have done at OCI and how we are providing the capabilities for our customers to take advantage of it. Now, before I jump into demo, right? Like, while Jovi is setting up the demo, right? I want to ask one more question for Jason, like, because I think I wanted to ask him before the resource manager topic, but I think I just wanted to make sure that I cover the resource manager and bring Jason into it from an expert commentary. Now, Jason, in today's global world, consistent deployment is key for every company, right? They want the reliability and resiliency for the core infrastructure, right? Can you please talk about how the industry is looking forward for the capabilities and how OCI provides those capabilities for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we understand most customers are going to be hosted in a multi-cloud model. That's basically the idea that you're going to be using some sort of combination of OCI, GCP, AWS, and/or Azure. You're going to be using two or more of those cloud platforms. And this is going to drive most customers to have to adopt, platforms that can do multi-cloud, that are open source or minimally, work well with all those different cloud providers, so they don't have to have, specific tools for each set. We're talking Terraform and Jenkins, the GitHubs, Docker, if you're working with containers. Our strategy at Oracle is, from a DevOps standpoint, we want to support all the open source tools. And, Nan talked about resource manager plugging to Terraform. That kind of demonstrates us supporting the community that has, those open source standards and letting you use what you probably already have today, which you may be using for your other cloud platforms. And so that's something you're going to continue seeing from us going forward, right? We're going to support the open source tools. We're going to probably be supporting tools you already got today that work with the other cloud providers. From an industry standpoint, there's tons of methodologies out there on what makes a successful DevOps program. And I'm not going to waste time here trying to get into that, but I would say this, one observation. I've seen some customers that do DevOps really successfully, right? They've scaled it and matured it well, is they've implemented a strategy that empowers developers across their entire enterprise to share, right? Using things like GitHub or Azure DevOps, whatever your repo is, but more importantly, co-collaborate on your stacks, co-collaborate on your network stacks or your application stacks so that everybody can, contribute. What this is going to do is going to, democratize access to that code, your infrastructure's code. It's going to give you access to a bigger team. It's going to give you more time to explore. It's going to give you more time to increase your innovation and unlock new features that you wouldn't have time for if it was all centralized into one group and only one group could create these stacks.
Thank you, Jason. Joey, back to you to show the compelling features which we talked about today. And then go ahead. Stage is all yours.
So we're talking about that deployment that Anand mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. We have a web application called MewShop. So it's going to be your one-stop shop for all of your cat's needs. So you have your auto feeders, dry food, grooming, cat litter. All this stuff is a e-commerce web application for getting your cat supplies. And we have this running in our OCI tenancy, and we deployed this using one of the tools that Anand had mentioned in the automation section, which is Resource Manager. So this application, if we go back to the OCI homepage and we click the top left here, head down to Developer Services, and you'll see Resource Manager, which is our managed Terraform service. And you can see here a couple of ways in which you can create a stack. We've created one using a template. So this e-commerce application is through a template that we can just quickly deploy with a stack. But you could also do this with files you upload, recreate from a compartment, pull something from object storage, etc. So if I go and I could create a stack here, or I could go look at some of the different stacks that I have provisioned. So you can see in our enterprise applications compartment, we have our MewShop basic quick start stack that has been deployed. If I click on that, you can see that our apply job succeeded and that we were able to deploy the resources that made this application run. And this follows your typical Terraform process. You do your plan, apply, destroy, and then you have a couple other actions that you can take as well. So if I wanted to import my state file, if I want to run drift detection to see if anything has changed from my stack that I have deployed, I could run drift detection and view the drift detection report to see that, and then import a state and download this Terraform state currently as needed. So that's one way. We're going off the theme of automation, cost optimization, and security. This is one of the tools that when you get in the cloud, you can use to effectively automate a lot of your infrastructure deployments like we did here. And if we go into the next theme that Anand mentioned, we talk about cost optimization. And one tool that you can leverage is Cloud Advisor. And Cloud Advisor gives you recommendations across a variety of categories. So not only does it give you recommendations in terms of cost, but also high availability, performance, and security. Security will just take you directly to CloudGuard, which I'll go after here. So if I go into the cost management details and view the different recommendations, unfortunately, my permissions don't allow me to see the actual cost savings, but every recommendation will have an associated cost saving with it as long as you have the appropriate permissions to view that information. If I go into recommendations, you could see some of the different things that it is looking at to potentially save you costs within your environment. And one that I want to double click on here is, it says, downsize underutilized compute instances. So what this has done is scanned my tenancy to find compute resources that have provisioned more OCPU than are necessary based off of its activity. And you could see the current OCPU count for some of these and what the recommended would be as well. So if I use a good example here, we have this instance that, go back one second. This instance that has 6 currently allocated, 6 VM standard E3 Flex, and could be reduced all the way down to 1 based off of its usage. And if I wanted to implement this, I would select it, implement selected. It would let me know what the current is, what it would go to. I could hit continue. And I could implement this to reduce the CPU count and accordingly save cost based off of that. And if you wanted to go and view any details of that, I could go and look at that instance, for example, and see some of the different metrics. So one piece, we're gaining visibility through monitoring within OCI. You could see the metrics for this particular instance to let you know how it's performing and then see if that recommendation is something that you actually want to take. So that would fall into the cost optimization route. And then one more area would be within security. So here, identifying areas in which I can save cost. Now let's look at areas in which I could improve my security posture. So if I go into here, this will take me to my CloudGuard console. Wait 1 second. And this gives you an overview of how your tenancy is doing. So in terms of what potential vulnerabilities do I have? Are there certain things that are high risk? It gives me a breakdown of all my potential problems. And then it gives me different recommendations on how to solve these problems. So I could go down here and get more information about my security score, about any new problems that have arisen, where some of this user activity is taking place, and then again, the overall score for you. So lots to improve within this tenancy. If I go in and actually view one of the problems, so you see here, you can view all problems within your tenancy. You can filter by the time in which something happened. Maybe you had a go live event and you found some potential vulnerabilities with that. You could filter based off of that event and view that way. You could also come in and view problems based off of their risk level. Maybe you want to tackle all your critical risks first and then move down from there. So I could select those. And then I could make it different based off of the compartment it's in. So right now I was just on my enterprise applications compartment, but I could even go all the way up to the root and get more of a tenancy-wide view here. And you can see one of the problem examples. You can get all the information from it here in the summary. But this is the example that we used within our presentation when we were looking at the workflow of CloudGuard. So if I look at a bucket being public, so that is a critical risk level based off of the detector recipe as a set of rules that I have set. I have determined that this is a critical risk for this environment. And I could take a look at the information for the resource. I could see any action that has been taken on this recently. And then I could even remediate it directly from here. So if I went in, clicked remediate, I could see what my options are. So in this case, simple example, making the bucket private. I would add the statement to allow CloudGuard to take that action, and then I could just remediate it directly from here. Let's say I don't want to do it from here and I want to go in and view the resource. I can go directly to the resource by clicking this link, and then I can take action myself and then just mark it as resolved or choose to dismiss if I don't think that this is a potential issue. And as always, with every problem, you will have a recommendation for you. So it will give you a recommendation on how you can go about resolving each of these issues here. So that'll be the case even if I go to something like user does not have MFA enabled, right? You get a recommendation for that as well. And you can tailor these rules however you see fit for a particular environment. If we look at some of the recipes here, you can see there's one for configurations and it's threat detector for certain users. And then down here, you have the user activity detector for activity upon your resources that you've designated. So within any of these, you can go and configure them to maybe adjust the risk level to say, maybe for my production environment, I think these should be higher risk, or for my development environment might be lower risk. You'll have the ability to configure that in here as well and apply that to those compartments accordingly. And the more you configure those, the more accurate your security posture will be to what is consistent with what your security strategy is. So that was a quick look at a couple of the services to fit into the theme of today's presentation. So you're in the cloud, now what? How do I automate my deployments? How do I monitor and optimize my cost? And then how do I make sure that my security posture is as good as it possibly can be? So that is all for the demo today. And then I will hand this back to Anand for some closing remarks. And then we'll do some Q&A.
Thank you, Joey. I appreciate the great demo. So before I go into the resources slide, in summary, I think we definitely talked about 3 things for you guys to take advantage of it. How to save cost on OCI. We have a lot of capabilities how to save cost on OCI. How can you take your security to the next level with security modernization? We also covered the automation at cloud scale with Resource Manager, and Joey touched upon connecting all the 3 in his demo. Okay. Now, in terms of other resources, we encourage you to take a look at it. Like, from a resource point of view, we have a lot of white papers for you to go and read about it. Or if you want to try out playing around with the OCI tenancy, we encourage you to come and use our hands-on lab exercise session, which is happening as the day 1 and beyond. We also have an hands-on lab sessions. You can join those. or you can do our live lab sessions. You can go ahead and all the links are published here in the slide, so you can try out on a live labs live labs. Lot of the resources on live labs where you can get your hands dirty and then build something on OCI as well. Okay, with that, I'll hand over to Renu back for her closing comments, and I think thank you for joining today.
Thank you, Anand, Joey, Jason, Len. Great demo, great session. Really appreciate your time and help here. I hope everyone enjoyed the session. Now it's time for two quick polls, or rather one poll with two questions. For the first one, please let us know how we are doing. We need your feedback to continue improving our session. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this webinar to your colleagues and friends, where 10 is great and 1 is bad? So I'll let you answer that. Our next session will be on May 2nd. And I'll tell you the details about that in a moment. I was hoping more people will participate in the poll. Okay, now let's move on to the other poll where you can let us know what kind of topics you would like us to cover in this series. So if there is something you want us to cover, let us know. Select the topics that you're more interested in, so that we can add sessions on those topics based on your feedback. Thanks again for joining us. So the May 2nd session will be on cloud operations, and you can find the details of that session on the same David and Björn page. I'm going to put it in chat over here, the link. Go ahead and register for that session if you're interested in that. If you have questions that were not answered, or if you have more questions later on, please feel free to email us at personaltrainers_us@oracle.com. There's a team watching this alias to answer your questions. We also started with a new hands-on series, which happens every first and third Friday. And our next session will be this Friday on the 21st, which is on managing and monitoring autonomous database. You can find the link here for the hands-on session. I just pasted it in the chat window. This will be a 2-hour-long session where you'll actually do the hands-on lab using the tenancy that we'll provide you. So with this, I would like to thank the presenters again for a great session today. Thank you again for joining us. See you all next time. Have a great day, everyone.